Mr. Pauna, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So I have the upper hand now. I should share the mic, but it's on my side now, so you can stop me. It's going to be more difficult for you to stop me. I want to take the discussion in a slightly different direction here and talk a bit about what I understand by competitiveness and try to link a bit this concept to where I see a role for the Gateway project. There's been a lot of literature about what competitiveness means, but I think increasingly economists and researchers have carved out some taxonomy of this concept, and probably the best entity which capture what competitiveness means is the World Economic Forum, which probably, as you know, they produce an annual report which is called the Global Competitiveness Report. So essentially in this taxonomy, competitiveness, it's about coherent policy making, it's about solid institutions for markets. So if you look at the countries which are the leaders of the competitiveness agenda, which have been the leaders for many decades, they are almost the same countries, very little other penetration coming from below. And this is because those countries were capable of promoting coherent policies for long periods of time and building institutions for markets and for democracy. If you look at the World Economic Forum, basic requirements for instilling competitiveness or boosting competitiveness, there are four items that they list as priority. One is infrastructure, and I think a lot of our colleagues in the panel have talked about the need to boost infrastructure, and I fully agree with that. Another one, it's about having a good health and primary education system. They don't even mention, for example, tertiary education as a basic requirement for competitiveness. But there are two others where I want to say a few words about. The third one is about having a stable and solid macroeconomic environment. And the fourth one, it's about building institutions for market. And I will display what that means. Coming back to this, so competitiveness really it's about productivity. It's the set of policies, the set of processes and factors which actually determine the level of productivity in a country. So the level of productivity means, as we know, GDP per capita, which means that you cannot have a competitive country which is not a productive country, and you cannot have a prosperous country which is not a high productivity country. That is very clear. Coming back to these two pillars which I want to put forward for debate here, the macroeconomic stability. All these competitiveness leaders of the world have promoted stable macroeconomic policies for long periods of time. What I mean by this, I mean three dimensions of macro stability. One, a solid fiscal policy aiming at low deficits. I think it is wrong to think that countries don't develop because they cannot run large budget deficits. Many of these countries which are global competitiveness leaders, they actually run very low deficits, and actually some of them have surpluses. So it's not actually a problem of resources, it's more a problem of planning for moving forward. A second dimension of macro stability, it's about the independence of the monetary policy, focusing on price stability. If you have low inflation, you have low borrowing costs, you have low interest rates, low financing costs for households, for companies and for the government. And the third pillar, it's about the third dimension, it's about the incomes policy. So essentially this says that wages need to be aligned with productivity gains, including in the public sector. And this, what we saw happening in Romania many times in the past, was these slippages between productivity growth and wage dynamics. I think that from a macro competitiveness perspective, Romania has done remarkably well in the last 5 years. So I think there are very few countries, actually, if you ask me, in Europe, which have been that successful in restoring their macroeconomic imbalances. So we have a low budget deficit. When we entered the crisis, we had the second highest structural fiscal deficit in the European Union. And to their merit, consecutive government put this agenda at the front of their policy agenda, and I think it has paid off. We also have inflation at historical lows, and clearly there are clear signs that the markets are rewarding Romania for this policy consistency. Like, for example, we've seen a significant decline in the financing costs. Romania, for example, an extension of maturities. Romania, for example, this year successfully issued a 30-year bond for the first time, and there are not that many emerging countries which actually are in this position. Also, the major rating agencies all actually rank Romania in the investment grade category. So clearly, these are remarkable successes which reflect the increased confidence in the policy agenda of the government. Macro stability is very difficult to achieve, and sometimes it's very painful, as we have seen throughout the crisis, but I think it's really easy to waste. So if you look at the example, some of the examples in Europe, you can see that there's been a sharp deterioration of the macro environment in a number of, a very limited number of years. So there were countries which were very stable, but they made some policy mistakes, and suddenly 2 years down the road, they had a very high debt, very high budget deficits, and a very high cost for the public sector to bear. So I think it is very important to continue this macroeconomic consolidation, and the fact that we have set for ourselves a target for Eurozone, and the fact that we have signed, for example, the Fiscal Governance Treaty of the European Union, I think these are important anchors for the medium-term macro policy agenda, and I hope that we continue to take them seriously. So the macro stability is one of the pillars of competitiveness, in my view. Another important one is about the functioning of the institutions for the markets. And there are many ways to look at the institutions, but I think one is very important in the context of Romania, which has to do with the long-term planning for allocating public and private resources in this country. Because we have the feeling that probably too many times we focus on the very short run with putting off fire and tend to ignore the long-term development priorities of the country. I think there is a need to better articulate what those priorities are. Andrei was saying that not everything should be a priority, so I think we should put together some filters which actually help us identify which are priorities, which are less of priorities for the long-term development of Romania. And I think there are countries in the world, there are many countries in the world which even have, if you want, ministers for planning, like, for example, many of the countries of Latin America. And I think they are very important. I'm not advocating for this in the case of Romania, but I think that we really need to look at the way we actually allocate resources. Very few people know, for example, we talk about the fact that we don't have highways, we don't have good schools and so on, but actually public capital spending in Romania is not low. It's the highest, actually, if you take the average of the last 15 years, as a share of GDP is the highest in the European Union. So actually we do put a lot of money into investment. What we do not probably see is the appropriate results associated with these investments. So what strategic planning, I think, has 3 or 4 important dimensions. One is about the policy, coherent policy derived from and coordinated policies derived from these long-term priorities of the country. The other one is linking those policies with the resources, meaning developing a coherent budgeting process, which should be multi-year, which should be program-based, and should be oriented to results, so that we can measure at all stages whether we are achieving our objectives or not. And this is also about establishing a professional civil service. I think you cannot really implement a policy agenda if you don't have a competent civil service, and I think here we still have to do more to empower our relative, I would say, skilled civil servants, to give them the opportunity to express themselves and to implement those policies that are put forward by the political establishment. I think that talking about the gateway, I think that the gateway project can play a significant role in identifying these long-term priorities of the country. And being here, I think, is a testament that this project can really take things forward. as a governmental project, because Gateway it's a project of the government. So the Gateway can work, for example, on helping establish a national ownership of the change agenda. This should not be driven from the outside. So like the IFIs, for example, should just be some technical advisors and help to articulate this change agenda, but this should come from the inside. We need to build a powerful coalition for change that is try to bring together the political establishment, the business leaders, the trade unions, academia, and debate about these development priorities, come up with a shared vision for change where policies need to align with these long-term priorities. And we have to communicate this agenda to the people because they have to understand why we are taking some measures, why we are not taking other measures. Equally important, I think, coming back to the previous discussion, is to try to deliver some quick wins. And this is where I see an important role for the Gateway as it articulates its institutional structure. I think the Gateway project should be in the position to propose a number of concrete strategic projects to leverage primarily private sector resources, and this is an area where I think we can also help. The bank should not be seen, the World Bank, as a financier primarily. I think that we should, if projects are good, there is no need actually. It's easy to find private funding for them. We can work primarily in a country like Romania to share our global knowledge, to focus on technical assistance projects, to focus on analytical work, and so on. And I was digging yesterday, I was curious. We do a lot of reports in the World Bank, probably we are the institutions which produces most of reports, globally speaking. And I was very curious to see whether we have a report about the Silk Road. So I was digging in the database, and surprise, surprise, we even have a report about the Silk Road. I actually center more about on Central Asia, but clearly I think this can be extended easily to countries like Romania. Thank you very much.